This episode is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the #1 seller of games and gaming accessories. And GatheringMagic.com, the #1 resource for Magic the Gathering news and articles.
Hello, my name is Jacob, and this is my Jeleva Nephalia Scourge deck. Alright, so let's get to it. This is Jeleva. She's my commander. Her colors are blue, black, and red. She is a 1/3 flying. When Jeleva Nephalia Scourge enters the battlefield, each player exiles the top X cards of his or her library, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast Jeleva. Whenever Jeleva attacks, you may cast an instant or sorcery card exiled with it without paying its mana cost. One thing that's important to note about this commander is that each time she comes into play, she can only access the cards that she has exiled that exact time she's come into play. So for instance, if you manage to recast her and you have some spells that you've previously exiled with her, you can no longer cast those spells. And let's move on. So we've got some lands. I will just rip through these. Got the Guildgates, Vivids, a couple of the Gain a Life lands, the Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, the tap and sacrifice to search for a basic, Bloodstained Mire. It's one of the fetch lands. You can pay a life and sacrifice it to search for a swamp or mountain, and that works rather well with the shock lands, which I have in here. Another fetch land, Scalding Tarn, searches for an island or mountain for a life. Blood Crypt, it is a swamp and a mountain, so it can be tutored for with those fetch lands, and Watery Grave as well, another shock land. Got Bojuka Bog, deal with the graveyards, it can exile some cards. Tolaria West, it's a tutor, and I can transmute it. It'll let me search for any card that costs 0, so I can mana fix with it. I can get Bojuka Bog. There are some nice little other lands that are quite helpful. It can also let me access the Singleton Pact of Negation, which I will get to later on. Temple of Deceit, nice little scry land. Creeping Tar Pit, it's a 3/2 man land, it's unblockable. It's nice, there's a few equipments in here, so to put one of those on this guy can get pretty nasty. Reliquary Tower, this deck can definitely go over its max hand size, so having no limit is definitely nice. Another fetch land, it'll let you get a swamp, mountain, or island. It's pretty nice. Got Wasteland, Strip Mine, Rupture Spire, Crumbling Necropolis, Opal Palace. This one's worth noting that if you pay an extra mana, you can increase the cost of Jeleva, and the way it's determined with how many cards are exiled from each player's library are the mana spent to cast her. So this lets you, in addition to mana fix, have the option of paying a little bit more mana and exiling some extra cards, which is nice. Got Command Tower, Riptide Laboratory, return a wizard. Jeleva is a wizard, so if you don't get anything you really like on her, it's a nice way to return her back to your hand and recast her, maybe exile some more cards. Rishadan Port. And into the actual deck, we've got Darksteel Ingot. I like it because it's indestructible, mana fix, acceleration. I do like to avoid the mana rocks as much as possible because I find they do get destroyed, but this one is indestructible. Soul Ring, on the other hand, gives you an immediate benefit when you use it, so I do like to use this one. Lightning Greaves, she is a small critter, so to give her haste and cast anything you exile, give her Shroud, it's a nice little safety. Sometimes she doesn't make it back to your next turn, so to be able to attack with her on your first turn is important. Swiftfoot Boots again. This one's nice. The hexproof lets you put some other equipment on her, so I do like the Swiftfoot. Empyrial Plate, this deck gets lots of cards, and to make her big and nasty, you can definitely get in general damage with her. This Empyrial Plate is a great win condition in this deck, and I really like it. Crystal Shard, one of my, I'd say, pet cards. I put it in almost every deck I have with blue, and it is particularly good in this deck because Jeleva, if you don't really access any cards with her, she's sort of useless, so it's important to be able to recast her or kill her, and this lets you return her to your hand and play her again if you don't really get any cards on any instants or sorceries on her that you really want to cast. You got Time Warp. This deck does have a few ways to take extra turns, which is important. This deck likes to win with creatures if possible. It has a way to get lots of zombies, which you'll see later, and they come into play tapped. It's nice to, you know, get another turn right away and just swing in with all those zombies for the win, or even get a lot of drakes with Talrand, which I'll also show later, and swing in with a whole bunch of drakes for the win. So moving on, Walk the Eons. Target player takes an extra turn after this one. You can buy back, sacrifice 3 lands, so if you've got a lot of land, you can really make the game end in your favor just by buybacking it as many times as you feel you can. And it is risky if you don't manage to finish the game and you sacrifice too many lands. It can put you way behind, but I do like it. Time Stretch, a really, really nice card to hit with Jeleva. Lets you take 2 extra turns, and if you got a bunch of creatures on the board, it is an easy way to really seal the game. Rite of Replication, a great card even without its kicker, but if you do manage to kick it, you can get 5 tokens of any creature on the battlefield, and that's really quite nasty, a really great way to get in a lot of damage and win the game. If you exile it with Jeleva, all you have to pay is 5 mana and you can kick it, so it's really like 5 mana, put 5 tokens into play, so that's really nice. Blatant Thievery, for each opponent gain control of target permanent that player controls. So if you're playing with a lot of people, this can gain control of the best thing they'll have. They got some lands that are particularly good, deals with that, just a really solid card all around, and can be cast with Jeleva, so. Opportunity, another nice big card. Target player draws 4 cards, it's instant speed, and it's worth noting that I really do like instants in this deck. They work particularly well with Talrand to put drakes into play, and there are a few counter spells, so it's nice to have the mana open. This is the zombie card I mentioned earlier, Army of the Damned. It is 8 mana, put 13 2/2 black zombies tokens onto the battlefield with flashback, and if you do cast something with Jeleva, it goes into your graveyard after you've cast it, doesn't stay in the exiled zone, so this is nice because if it doesn't work, if you get wrathed or if there's a board wipe, you still have access to the card to cast it once again. So that is nice. I'm not going to say this card right, so I'm not even going to try. But it does destroy a creature, and its controller loses life equal to its power plus its toughness. So that is a lot of damage. So you cast it on a 6/6 dragon, that player's losing 12 life, and that can be quite nasty. It's a lot of damage. Decree of Pain. Destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated and draw a card for each creature destroyed. Wowee! That is a lot of potential cards. It can also be cycled, but you really want to be casting it, hard casting it, or using Jeleva to cast it. And this would be my favorite board wipe to use with this deck. Highly recommend it. Cruel Ultimatum, probably my favorite card in the deck, probably the best card in the deck. Especially 1v1, it's not as good in a multiplayer game, but Target opponent sacrifices a creature, discards 3 cards, loses 5 life. You return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, draw 3 cards, and gain 5 life. It's pretty nasty. I've cast this on turn 4 or 5 with Jeleva, and it is game over, having them basically discard their cards and sacrifice their creatures. I mean, plus all the other advantages like drawing cards, gaining life. It is amazing. And here we've got Thraximundar, and I would even recommend potentially making this your general. He is really nasty. I have included a few ways to sacrifice creatures, including Cruel Ultimatum, and it's just really big. It is pseudo-destruction, it is haste, he's nice, and I've played him as my general before. He works pretty nicely. So keeping on the sacrificing theme, here is Braid's Cabal minion, and there's a reason she is banned as generals as a general in a lot of playgroups. She is just absurd. She is a way you can use her to sacrifice Jeleva if it makes it back to your turn, and worst case scenario, you just end up sacrificing her, and it's not really a big deal. More sacrifice, instant speed, worth noting, target player sacrifices a creature. Another instant speed, worst version, they do gain some life, but I like the instant speed sacks. And here we've got Stranglehold, and you might find this interesting because, for one, I like it in this deck. There are a lot of people playing cards that will copy spells and abilities, and this deck does have ways to take extra turns. So I like the part that it says if an opponent would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn. And in addition, there's a lot of people using tutors. There's a lot of, sack lands that'll let you search your library. And this really shuts down a large portion of many, many decks. And it works really, really well with the next card. Malaran of the Mornsong. Players cannot draw cards. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player loses 3 life, searches his or her library for a card, and puts it in their hand and then shuffles the library. So, Stranglehold. Your opponents can't search libraries. Players can't draw cards and search their library instead and take 3 damage. That is a pretty nice lock, and if they can't deal with that, it's pretty much game over. And here we've got another way to sort of take the win. I mentioned it earlier, Talrand. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, put a 2/2 blue Drake creature with flying into play. And I do like this card a lot. I've sort of gone with a Talrand sub-theme. There are a lot of cheap cantrips and little instants that'll let you get basically like flash, speed, Drakes, and I really like that. Another card, it gets better in multiplayer and works really well with my cheap cantrip spells. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, Scuttersight deals 2 damage to each opponent. So I like to be able to, especially if you have him and a bunch of cards you can cast at the same time, he's not likely to live too long, but if you do it all in the same turn, you can pretty much guarantee he's going to get some good damage in. And moving on to some destruction, we've got the charms. I've got Crosis Charm and Grixis Charm. I like them both a lot. The Crosis Charm, return a permanent to its owner's hand, destroy a target non-black creature, and it can't be regenerated or destroy a target artifact, so that does give me access to some artifact destruction in this deck. And the Grixis Charm, return target permanent to its owner's hand, or target creature gets -4/-4, or creatures you control get +2/+0. I haven't found that the last ability comes up very often as something that matters. It's not too often in this deck that you need to pump up your creatures, unless, say, you have a bunch of Drakes or you have a bunch of zombies and you need to pump them up for the win, but for the most part, it's not necessary. They're both really great cards. I've got Go for the Throat, destroy target non-artifact creature. It's an instant, it's cheap, it's good. Annihilate, destroy target non-black creature, cannot be regenerated, draw a card, instant speed, cantrips, I like it. Spin into Myth, put target creature on top of its owner's library, then Fate Seal 2. I put this in almost all my EDH decks with blue. It just gets rid of generals, instant speed, and I mean, what's better than that? You got Into the Royal, return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If it's kicked, draw a card, another cantrip. Repulse, return target creature to its owner's hand, draw a card, another cantrip. Capsize, return target permanent to its owner's hand and buyback. Very nice. I like the buyback with Talrand, lets you keep getting drakes. Some defensive cards, I've got Fogbank in here, Guardgo Mazoa, Propaganda, Collective Restraint, and some more, let's see, Tudor-esque cards. This card is Mystic Speculation. I do like the buyback with Talrand and also Gutter Snipe. It is not an instant, which I don't like, but it does let you scry for 3. It's really nice to dig through the deck and recast some instants. And long-term plan, search your library for a card, then put that card third from the top. This is a nice card. It lets you tutor for anything, mana fix, whatever cards you need. It's particularly nice with Jeleva as she can remove the top 4, and you can tutor for a big expensive instant or sorcery and play it for free with Jeleva, which is awesome. Mystical Teachings, search your library for an instant card. There are no cards with flash. There are tons of instants in this deck, and it can search for it at instant speed, and it also flashbacks. And onto the counter spells. I include a few counter spells. They're not particularly synergistic with Jeleva, as you can't really use them with her ability, but they're still nice to have. Hinder can tuck a card on the bottom or leave it on top. I almost always send it back to the bottom rather than put it on top of their deck. Spell Crumple. Counter spell, if it's countered this way, put it on the bottom of its owner's library, and it also puts itself on the bottom of your library, so that's quite nice. Dismiss, a cantrip counterspell, I like it. Pact of Negation, I mentioned this card earlier. You can tutor for it with Tolaria West, and it's a free counterspell. I like it. Soul Manipulation, counter target creature spell and or return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. I like this with Jeleva because, you know, you can use it to return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. Even with her, a lot of counter spells become useless, but this one you can still get some value out of with Jeleva. Think Twice, draw a card, flashback, it's an instant, provides some card advantage, and I like it with Gutter Snipe, I like it with Talrand. Some more card advantage, Ancestral Vision. It suspends for 4, target player draws 3 cards, and you can actually cast this with Jeleva if you exile it with her, which is nice. And a whole bunch of cantrips. This seems pretty weak, but actually I like it with Talrand. With Talrand in play, this card reads 1 blue, put a 2/2 Drake into play, and draw a card at instant speed, so it's pretty cool. And then a better version of Reach Through Myths. Opt, look at the top card of your library, you may put that card on the bottom. Mental note, put the top 2 cards of your library in your graveyard. Not too relevant. It can potentially put some cards with flash in your graveyard, or maybe a creature that you can get back with Soul Manipulation. Brainstorm, I like this card a lot with Jeleva, as you can, if you have any instants or sorceries in your hand, you can put them on top and then exile them with Jeleva. Peek lets you see the other player's hand. Thought Scour, a better version of Mental Note. Target player puts the top two cards of their library in their graveyard, so if you want to use it on yourself, try to get a creature in there, maybe a card with flashback. Or you can use it on your opponents. I've seen this used if your opponent tutors, for instance, and puts a card on top of their deck. There are some tutor cards that will do that, and this can ensure you get rid of that card before they draw it. Charmbreaker Devils. With all my really cheap instants and sorceries, this card gets really, really big. And if it makes it to your upkeep, you get something back, and I like that value. Onto the sort of miscellaneous cards. Vampire Nighthawk. He's a 2/3 flying, Death Touch, lifelink. He's good on defense, he's good on offense, and he'll give you some life, which is really nice. I love putting Empyrial Plate on him and just gaining a ton of life. Let's see, Runescarred Demon. I'd put him in almost every deck I have with black. He tutors, he's big and giant and flies. Treachery. When it comes into play, untap 5 lands, you control enchanted creatures, so it's like a free control magic. Another card that's fairly standard in a lot of EDH decks, Consecrated Sphinx. Whenever an opponent draws a card, you may draw 2 cards. It's just really good. Nivix Guildmage. And this is probably, in my opinion, the best Guildmage. For every 3 mana, you can draw a card and discard a card and just sort of filter through your deck. And in addition, there were a few cards I had to choose as far as copying instants or sorceries, and this was my favorite. It's a 2/2 body, and it can let you copy one of your giant spells. And if you're casting them for free, chances are you've got 4 mana laying around to copy something. If you've got 8, you can make a couple copies. 12, 3 copies. This card's got a lot of potential. I highly recommend it. Cavern Harpy, an old card. I like it a lot. You can bounce Jeleva with it, you can bounce any creature you have with it, and you can also return it to your hand for 1 life. So as long as you've got life, this thing kicks around, which is really cool. Cavern Harpy. Sorry if the top's cut off of these. I'll try to fix that. I've got Baleful Strix. It's a 2 mana 1/1 flying Death Touch, and it cantrips. It's a good blocker, good on defense. I like it a lot. And Phyrexian Arena. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and lose a life. It can start to hurt after a while, but for 3 mana, drawing cards like that, it really is nice to have. Thanks for watching CMDR Decks. Please subscribe and favorite.